Now to the other big news this morning. President taking off the gloves. I was unaware he ever had a pair on, hiring another legal attack dog to add to his team. At the same time, his lawyers are handing over documents in hopes that it will help shield the president from Bob Mueller's investigation. I want to bring my panel who's been patiently waiting. Mike Pesca, the host of The Gist, Slate's daily podcast, which I highly recommend. Evan Siegfried, a Republican strategist and a Twitter aficionado. And Matt Mueller, former chief spokesman for the Justice Department. Matt, to you first. Assess the strategy that's being employed by Trump and his legal team. They're privately handing over documents, cooperating with Robert Mueller's team, but publicly trashing the investigation's legitimacy. Is President Trump trying to play ball, or are his lawyers, and then publicly he's crushing it in hopes of a political win, not just with his base, but with GOP leadership, because he certainly doesn't want them to protect Bob Mueller?
You know, I think what you see is a little bit of a split inside the president's legal team, and maybe a split between members of the president's legal team and the president himself. It's been well reported that Ty Cobb, who's the in-house, in the White House, works in the White House counsel's office, in-house attorney for the president, has been telling the president for months to cooperate, to turn over documents, and this probe would be finished by Thanksgiving and then by Christmas. And of course, those are dates that have come and gone. And you have other members of the president's legal team who have counseled a much more aggressive approach. And what I think we're seeing now from the president is the president turning to those advisors, some probably on his legal team, and others, hosts on Fox News and personalities that show up on Fox News who are counseling him to take a more aggressive approach with the president. And I think, we'll see what it means that he hired this new attorney, Joe DeGeneva, who is a somewhat more serious player than some of the other people on the president's legal team, but also plays kind of in the fringes on the right, has espoused conspiracy theories at times in the past. We're going to see if that addition to the president's legal team means he wants a more serious lawyer to deal with the special counsel, or whether he's now taking his case to the public, and not to the broader public, not trying to convince a majority, but just trying to convince a majority of the Republican Party that this investigation is inappropriate and should be discredited. All
right, Evan, Washington Post is reporting that Mueller's team is focusing on the firing of Mike Flynn, and they said things fall into two categories in Mueller's mind. What did the president do, and what was he thinking when he did it? What does that tell you about where their head is?
They're looking at obstruction of justice, potentially. I think they want to know, why did the president ask Jim Comey to drop an investigation into Mike Flynn? And Comey did not. So he ended up getting rid of Comey later on. But getting rid of Mike Flynn, they only got rid of him because it came out that he had been violating the rules on discussing things with, or he lied to the FBI. Now, what we're seeing with the president right now is that he's retreating to sort of a safe bubble. And that's a dangerous trap for any president. The president rarely leaves the White House, and when he does, he goes to places where he knows he'll get a warm reception. And that empowers him to say things. And it's why when an attorney like John Dowd, who has a string of unsuccessful representations of people like Rajaratnam, Fife Symington, Robert Reckmeyer, when he's saying it's time to leave the Trump or he's thinking about leaving the Trump legal team, there's a problem and it's dysfunctional, especially when you add Joe DeGeneva, pardon me, and who argued in 1997 in the Wall Street Journal that it's actually good if you indict a president. And a president should be indicted because no one's above the law, and it teaches a valuable civics lesson. Now he's not sticking to that.
I think it's so interesting that you're saying he's staying within the White House, inside his echo chamber, only speaking at Mar-a-Lago. It's as though it's sort of the evil queen, mirror, mirror on the wall approach, and we know how that worked out for the Queen and Snow White. Washington Post is reporting that the president is chomping at the bit to speak to Mueller's team. Is that, to exactly Evan's point, because he's only speaking to his own people who believe it? These are people who accept when President Trump exaggerates or lies, but maybe none of whom realize if he lies to investigators, it's a crime.
Yeah. The stimulus and response for Trump has always been, I go out, I give an interview, and I always make things better for myself. Maybe because his enablers tell him good job, or he's giving an interview to the sort of forums like Fox or Fox and Friends where they tell him good jobs. His lawyers know that there's only exposure by letting the guy blab to the prosecutors. Perjury trap or non-perjury trap, you want to put that out there. What lawyer would let their client go and say, go, talk off the cuff, especially when there's evidence, like how he dealt with the McCabe firing, tied it to when he didn't have to. This was something that he wasn't connected to until he connected to it himself, or when he told told Lester Holt why he fired Comey, and he gave his motivations. So in the press, he has heard himself so many times. Why would you let him talk to people with the power to indict him? His
okay, but that base that he's playing to Matt's point earlier, is not the bigger CEO-type wealthy base that the president may have acquired in the last year. It's that original fringe base. We just showed an image on the screen with the president standing next to Steve Schwartzman, the co-founder of Blackstone. There is no way Steve Schwartzman would be saying to the president, "Dear Mr. President, sure, bring on that guy from Fox News and let it rip." But Matt, does the president have a point? There was an article in the AP where it has a quote from an outside Trump advisor who says Trump believes if this investigation goes on indefinitely, it will, quote, choke the life out of his presidency. There's a real point there. So isn't he damned if he does, damned if he doesn't?
No, he's damned if he committed a crime. And this investigation will choke the life out of his presidency if he did something illegal, and Bob Mueller finds it and has evidence of it and is able to, either decide that he can indict the president or can refer it over to Congress for impeachment proceedings. If the president has nothing to hide, he should cooperate with the investigation. And as to this question of whether he should sit down with Bob Mueller, look, I understand that the president's counsel are going to have legal equities in mind. They're going to be advising him from a legal perspective. But he's not just any client. He's not a private citizen. He is the President of the United States, the head of the executive branch, responsible for faithfully executing all laws. He has a different obligation than a private citizen who just has an obligation to look out for their own personal interests. He has an obligation as the President of the United States to sit down and cooperate with this investigation and talk to Bob Mueller and his team. Taking the fifth is not a viable option for the President of the United States. It's not something we should allow our leaders to do.
All right, I want to ask about this new lawyer, Joe DiGenova. He has slammed the FBI and the Department of Justice, and I want to share part of what he told Fox Business just a couple of weeks ago.
This was a plot, a brazen plot to exonerate Hillary Clinton in the email server case to ensure that she became president. And if by chance she lost, part of the plot was to frame Donald Trump with a false crime. This is the single most important scandal of the last 50 years because senior DOJ and FBI officials engaged in conduct that was designed to corrupt an American presidential election. It wasn't the Russians who corrupted the presidential election. It was the American officials at the Department of Justice and the FBI.
Okay, so let's just back this up. He said it wasn't the Russians. We know the intelligence agencies support that, GOP leadership supports that, and Russians have been indicted. What does this tell you about the direction the president is going in?
He clearly has hired someone who will also agree with him that Ted Cruz's father was responsible for shooting JFK.
He's willing to break the rule. The guy's got a mustache.
The guy, well, let's not attack people with mustaches.
I'm not. It's not the president's jam.
But this man is clearly forgetting to wear his tinfoil hat. He's from the Alex Jones conspiracy school right now. He's accusing the Department of Justice and the FBI of, after the election, because of trying to rig it. But they could have rigged it much more easily beforehand. This is just not making sense to me. It's not based in logic. It's going out and it's playing to something that has been going on in the very far right fringes of there's this deep state out to get everybody. And now we're seeing in polling that 70-some% of Americans believe there actually is an unelected bureaucracy, secret society. That is very troubling because when you start pushing these narratives,
unless you're Steve Bannon, who would love for America to think that and break down the system. Michael?
I would just say that those statements seem crazy to us, but it got him hired, didn't it?
100. Oh, that is an excellent point. It got him hired, but let's talk about Dowd for a moment, because you would think every top lawyer or loads of top lawyers out there would want to represent the president of the United States. And there was a lot of law firms who didn't want to. But now we've learned, I want to say it's New York Times reporting, that Dowd has contemplated leaving his post, but he's concluded that there is no control over the behavior of the president. If you're a lawyer and your client can't trust you and refuses to listen to you, is that when you say, I can't put my name next to this person anymore?
It's at least when you put that idea out there through the New York Times, which you know that Trump reads. So he's trying to do whatever he can to signal to his client, rein it in. We have a battle between the id and the superego, and the president's the id.
Well, my late grandfather was a criminal defense attorney, and he had a client who was sort of Trump-like, and he said to the judge one day, Your Honor, it's not my fault my client was an idiot and did everything he shouldn't have done. And that's what Donald Trump is doing. He's lashing out at Bob Mueller directly. He's now hiring a guy to attack Bob Mueller. He thinks this is a PR war, and when he goes in and meets with Bob Mueller, he's just going to be able to charm his way out of it. Bob Mueller and his legal team are the legal dream team, and John Dowd is not a top lawyer, nor are Ty Cobb. The top lawyers in the country don't want to represent the president because they know he's uncontrollable, and this is a very complex case, and they're up against very tough opposition.
All right, gentlemen, please stick around.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.